We all know the story. A fiercely independent and adventurous young man leaves his family, friends, and everything behind to try and survive in the Alaskan wilderness. 4 months after stepping into the wild, hunters find his decomposed body inside an abandoned bus. We mostly know this true story of Chris McCandless from the movie Into the Wild. And, to give credit to the film, it almost has the quality of a documentary because they kept the screenplay incredibly close to reality. But, of course, this movie leaves out certain parts of Chris's life and his mindset. In this video, I want to tell you the true story behind the film we all know, the parts the movie didn't tell you, the wild truth. Chris McCandless was born in February 1968. His father, Walt, was a highly successful aerospace engineer. Walt worked for NASA for many years, later established his own consulting firm, and became quite wealthy. Chris's mother, Billy, was originally a housewife, but after Walt started his own business, she helped her husband with the company's accounting. Chris also had a younger sister named Corrine. The family's financial situation was well above average. They went on nature trips together, took boat tours, and went on expensive vacations. The exposure to these nature trips at a young age ignited Chris's passion for the wild early on. What a beautiful family portrait, right? They have 2 bright children. They are wealthy, educated, they travel, and they have fun. Except, no years after her brother's tragic death, his sister Corrine wrote in her book that their father was an alcoholic who frequently subjected both their mother, Chris, and herself to severe violence. At one point, Walt even tried to suffocate Billy with a pillow. He would constantly tell his wife, "I worked at NASA. You don't even have a college degree. We are here thanks to the money I earn. If I left this house, you would starve on the streets." Corrine also noted that while their mother occasionally resorted to physical violence against the children, she mostly wore them down through intense emotional abuse. Chris's childhood was spent fighting with his parents. He especially tried to protect his younger sister from his father's beatings. Around that time, a thought began to sprout in his mind. He was going to leave this house. He would cut his family out of his life as soon as possible. Still, he maintained a shred of respect for them. But that final shred would soon be irrevocably destroyed. When Chris was 18, during the summer he graduated from high school. He visited some family friends. There, he discovered a hidden truth about his parents. Chris's father had been married to a woman named Marcia before Billy. While Walt was courting Billy, he was still legally married to Marcia. In fact, he had fathered 6 children with her. Leaving aside the affair, the truly bizarre part was this. Walt married Billy as a result of these flings, but he still hadn't divorced Marcia. He was married to 2 women at the same time. After a while, he finally divorced Marcia, and Chris's mother was essentially promoted from mistress to wife. Billy eventually learned the whole truth, yet she chose to stay with Walt, and the 2 hid everything from their children. The moment Chris learned this truth from family friends, he lost the last bit of respect he had for them. Now, he truly hated his family. While away from home, he wrote a letter to his sister saying, "When the time is right, I will cut them out of my life completely. It will happen suddenly. I will divorce them forever, and I will never speak to these 2 idiots again for the rest of my life. My business with them will be over, finally and definitely." You don't even need to read his letters to understand that Chris was detached from his family. Just looking at their family photos is enough. Chris is not smiling in a single one of them. Truly, none. It's obvious he didn't want to be there. Don't mistake Chris's temperament as naturally dull or sour, though. This young man, who posed cheerfully and full of life in every other photo, looked completely miserable only when he was with his parents. During this period, Walt and Billy's primary tactic was to maintain a bond with Chris by offering financial assistance or buying him expensive gifts. For example, they offered to replace the Datsun car Chris had bought with his own hard-earned money and buy him a luxury vehicle instead. Chris, of course, rejected the offer. His sister recounted that he said, "They think they can buy my respect with their money." Chris constantly told his sister, "Earn your own money. Don't depend on theirs." We learn most of this private information about the McCandless family from Corrine McCandless's book. The Wild Truth. In interviews, Walt and Billy claimed the instances of violence and abuse were heavily exaggerated, arguing that Corinne blew things out of proportion just to sell books. However, Walt's children from his previous marriage agreed with their half-sister, confirming that their father was indeed prone to rage and heavy drinking. Looking at these testimonies, it's hard not to side with Corinne. Today, Corinne carries on her brother's story through public speaking, writing, and entrepreneurship. So far, we've focused heavily on the family drama. Let's talk a bit about Chris's mind and character. Alongside outdoor sports, Chris was deeply passionate about literature. He had 3 favorite authors: Leo Tolstoy, Jack London, and Henry David Thoreau. The common thread among these 3 writers is that they either set out on a journey to find the meaning of life or wrote extensively about characters who did. Chris was fascinated by the concept of human-nature interaction and the transformative experience of exposing oneself to the elements. Deep down, he wanted to embark on a long journey far away from everyone and experience nature alone in all its subtleties. It was incredibly clear that he operated on a completely different wavelength than his peers. For example, when Chris was on his high school cross-country running team, he would motivate his teammates by saying things like, "We are running to escape evil. We are running towards goodness. We are running to reach God." His teammates recalled that his intense speeches actually worked and motivated them deeply. In his social life, Chris was well-liked, charismatic, and fun to be around. Yet, despite getting along well with people, he knew he would never live a conventional life. He initially wanted to pursue his nomadic dream right after high school, but he gave in to his family's pressure to attend university. He figured he would grit his teeth for 4 years and then start traveling. He studied history and anthropology, graduating with a 3.2 GPA. Right after graduation, he told his family, "I'm going to travel a bit this summer to clear my head, and at the end of the summer, I'll apply to Harvard Law School." His parents believed him, but his sister Corinne knew that Harvard was a lie and that her brother was leaving home, never to return. While at university, Chris had saved $25,000 from various part-time jobs, a very respectable sum of money for that time. Before starting his journey, he donated every single cent of it to a charitable organization. With just a few belongings, he got into his Datsun car and began a 2-year odyssey. At one point, Chris parked his car in a desert wash and a sudden flash flood left the vehicle unusable. He abandoned the car right there, burned his remaining cash, and continued his journey entirely on foot. He stayed in abandoned houses, slept on the streets, and lived virtually like a tramp. After a year of hitchhiking, he realized he couldn't sustain this lifestyle completely penniless. He needed to secure shelter and food. To do that, Chris had to temporarily return to civilization to save money. But he wouldn't return as Chris. He shed his old identity, chose a new name, Alexander Supertramp, and introduced himself as Alex to everyone he met. He was so thoroughly done with his past life that he even rejected his own name. He took whatever work he could find, cleaning grain elevators, pest control, painting, and mowing weeds. While farmers struggled to find laborers for these grueling tasks, Chris accepted everything without complaint. Employers loved his work ethic. He did even the simplest jobs with meticulous care. Although he withdrew into his shell from time to time, he generally connected deeply with the people he met. An elderly man named Ronald Franz grew to love Chris so much that he asked to adopt him as his grandson. Chris also caught the attention of the opposite sex. Several girls fell for him, and opportunities for casual encounters knocked on his door frequently. But he turned them all down. He was clearly searching for a rarer, deeper kind of connection. He spoke endlessly about Alaska to everyone. He told them that one day he would take on the ultimate Alaskan adventure. Even when seasoned travelers warned him about how lethal Alaska could be and told him he wouldn't survive, it was impossible to change his mind. Finally, Chris set off for Alaska. In a farewell letter to his close friend Wayne Westerberg, he wrote, "If this adventure proves fatal and you don't ever hear from me again, I want you to know you're a great man. I now walk into the wild." This exact phrase, "into the wild," later inspired the title of both the book and the movie. A local man named Jim Gallion agreed to drive him to the edge of the Stampede Trail. Jim spent the entire drive warning Chris about the immense risks he was taking. For his survival gear, Chris brought only a 5-kilogram bag of rice, a .22 caliber rifle, a camera, a few tools, and a heavy collection of books. Jim immediately pointed out that the rifle was inadequate. Trying to hunt large, fierce Alaskan game with a tiny .22 caliber bullet would be nearly impossible. He also warned him that 5 kilograms of rice would quickly run out, leaving him in a severe crisis. Jim realized Chris was dangerously inexperienced. Despite only traveling for 2 years, Chris had chosen Alaska, a brutal environment that even decades-old survivalists hesitated to enter. Jim tried everything to talk him out of it, but Chris had an answer for everything. Finally, Jim pleaded, "Let's go to a store. Let me buy you a solid rifle and proper provisions. I'll pay for it myself." Predictably, Chris refused. Jim finally relented and dropped the youth off at the trail. Before parting ways, Jim managed to convince Chris to accept his old rubber boots, 2 sandwiches, and a packet of chips. Jim had glimpsed the stubborn, impatient, and fiercely independent side of this young man. Jim Gallion was the last person to see Chris McCandless alive. In the movie, the character of Jim Gallion is played by the actual, real-life Jim Gallion. 15 years after the real event, he stepped in front of the camera to reenact dropping Chris off. We have no eyewitnesses to what Chris went through or how he died in the wild. So, how do we know what happened? Chris kept brief daily logs throughout his adventure. It's hard to call it a full diary. He would write down the day number and add a brief 3 to 5 word note about his struggles. We piece his story together from these raw logs. Additionally, Chris had a habit of underlining passages in his books and writing small notes in the margins, giving us a window into his psychology. And most importantly, we have his camera. Chris constantly took self-portraits in Alaska, setting up the timer and posing. Using these journals and photos, let's look at his 113-day journey. Chris spent his first 3 days exploring the area. On the 4th day, he stumbled upon an abandoned bus. In his log, he wrote, "Day 4, the magic bus day." To Chris, this bus truly felt like magic. It contained a bunk bed and a wood stove. Deciding it was an ideal place to set up camp, he moved in. But what was a bus doing in the middle of nowhere? In 1960, Alaskan workers had brought the vehicle out to use as a mobile shelter while building a road. When the construction was halted and the bus's axle broke, they abandoned it. 30 years later, it became Chris's sanctuary. He immediately carved his philosophy, his manifesto, onto a piece of wood inside the bus. He wrote it in the third person, likely viewing himself as a character in an epic novel. 2 years he walks the earth. No phone, no pool, no pets, no cigarettes. Ultimate freedom. An extremist. An aesthetic voyager whose home is the road. Escaped from Atlanta never to return. 'Cause the West is the best. And now, after 2 rambling years, comes the final and greatest adventure. The climactic battle to kill the false being within and victoriously conclude the spiritual revolution. No longer to be poisoned by civilization, he flees and walks alone upon the land to become lost in the wild. Was Chris's goal to live in this bus forever? No. He intended to cross the terrain and reach the Bering Sea, and he actually made decent progress. But when he realized the forest was becoming impossibly dense, he returned to the bus to establish a base camp. He gathered wild berries, hunted squirrels and grouse, and began reading Tolstoy's Family Happiness. He underlined a specific passage. "I wanted movement and not a calm course of existence. I wanted excitement and danger and the chance to sacrifice myself for my love." There was an excess of energy which found no outlet in our quiet life. In the photos from his first few weeks, Chris looks genuinely happy. He hadn't lost much weight yet, he was smiling, and he posed proudly with his small game. But as time went on, his body began losing mass. On day 9, his log simply reads, "Weakness." On day 11, he wrote, "Disaster." On day 14th, "Misery." We don't know exactly what happened during those days, but he was clearly realizing that the wilderness was unforgiving. He was struggling to hunt enough calories with his small rifle and was freezing because of his dropping body fat. During this time, he read Thoreau's Walden and underlined this passage. The result is commonly a certain amount of physical limitation, but no one ever regretted a life lived according to higher principles. If the day and the night are such that you greet them with joy, and life emits a fragrance like flowers and sweet-scented herbs, that is your success. He also underlined, rather than love, than money, than fame, give me truth. I sat at a table where were rich food and wine in abundance, but sincerity and truth were not, and I went away hungry from the inhospitable board. Nature, unlike his family, did not lie to Chris. It didn't hide the truth, no matter how cruel it was. Chris successfully completed his first month in the wild. Then came day 43. He wrote moose in giant letters in his journal. He had managed to shoot a massive bull moose with his tiny .22 rifle, an incredible feat. He photographed his prize, but killing the moose was the easy part. Preserving the meat from swarms of flies and maggots in the summer heat was the real challenge. This is where things began to fall apart. His subsequent entries reveal the unraveling. Day 44. Butchering meat is extremely difficult. Swarms of flies. Day 45. Trying to preserve meat by smoking it. Day 46. Smoking continues. I can only deal with this at night. Day 48. Maggots have already appeared. Smoking seems ineffective. Don't know what to do. This is a disaster. Wish I had never shot the deer. One of the greatest tragedies of my life. On day 50, he officially gave up on the ruined meat. For the next 7 days, from days 51 to 57, Chris wrote absolutely nothing. He just drew lines across the pages. His morale was completely shattered. On day 58, he resumed his entries. By day 66, he returned to Tolstoy's family happiness. But this time, the passage he underlined was fundamentally different from his usual antisocial, isolationist philosophy. Tolstoy wrote, I have lived through much and now I think I have found what is needed for happiness. A quiet, secluded life in the country, with the possibility of being useful to people, then work which one hopes may be of some use, then rest, nature, books, music, love for one's neighbor. Such is my idea of happiness. Every other passage Chris had ever highlighted praised breaking away from humanity, but here, Tolstoy was emphasizing the value of human relationships. Chris had spent years running away from society, but he was finally realizing that absolute isolation wasn't the answer. He decided it was time to return to civilization. On day 67, he wrote, leaving the bus. But nature had other plans. To get to the bus, Chris had easily waded through the Teclanica River 2 months prior when it was only knee-deep. However, during those 2 months, the summer heat had melted the surrounding glaciers. The river was now a roaring, waist-deep torrent of glacial runoff. On day 68, the day he tried to cross, his log reads, disaster. On day 69, crossing the river seems impossible. Lonely, scared, Chris had brought an overly basic map. If he had carried a detailed topographical map like experienced hikers do, he would have known that just 1 kilometer away, there was an alpine gauging station with a hand-operated tramway built precisely for crossing the flooded river. Safety was just a short walk away, but he didn't know it. On day 94, the true breaking point arrived. Extremely weak. Fault of potato seed. Problem just to stand up. Starving. Great jeopardy. Chris had been poisoned. His body became so weak that he could no longer hunt. He vomited everything he ate and began losing weight rapidly. By day 100, he accepted his fate. Made it, but in weakest condition of life. Death looms as serious threat. Too weak to walk out, have literally become trapped in the wild. Sensing the end was near, Chris taped a desperate SOS note to the bus door. SOS, I need your help. I am injured, near death, and too weak to hike out of here. I am all alone. This is no joke. In the name of God, please remain to save me. I am out collecting berries close by and shall return this evening. Thank you, Chris McCandless. August. For the first time in 2 years, he signed his real name, Chris McCandless. The illusion of Alexander Supertramp was officially over. On day 107, in stark contrast to his agonizing reality, he wrote, "Beautiful blueberries." The next 5 days were completely blank, marked only by slashes. On day 113, he wrote the number, but left the page completely empty. That day, August 18, 1992, is presumed to be the day he died. Just before the end, Chris took one final self-portrait. Though emaciated and ghost-like, he was smiling, holding a farewell note that read, "I have had a happy life and thank the Lord. Goodbye and may God bless all." He then crawled into his sleeping bag and closed his eyes. On September 6th, 19 days after his death, a group of hunters discovered the bus. Detecting a heavy odor they assumed was a rotting animal, they stepped inside and found Chris's body. He was 24 years old and weighed just 30 kilograms. How exactly was he poisoned? On day 94, Chris blamed wild potato seeds. However, experts initially disputed this because wild potato seeds were widely considered safe in botanical literature. They argued Chris must have made a rookie mistake and confused the wild potato with the highly toxic wild sweet pea. This explanation didn't sit well with John Krakauer, the author of Into the Wild. Chris had successfully distinguished between the plants for 3 months. Why would he suddenly make a fatal error? Krakauer spent years researching the chemistry of the plants alongside botanists. They eventually discovered that during the late summer life cycle, wild potato seeds produce a toxic amino acid that causes latherism, a condition that induces paralysis and prevents the body from absorbing nutrients. Chris hadn't misidentified the plant. He was the victim of incomplete scientific literature. He didn't just starve. He was paralyzed by the seeds, making starvation inevitable. Could he have saved himself? There were 2 full cans of gasoline inside the bus. He could have set a massive forest fire to signal rescue planes. Why didn't he? His sister, Karine, believes that even to save his own life, Chris loved nature too much to deliberately destroy it. Alternatively, he may have simply been too weak by the time he realized he was dying, figuring a rescue crew wouldn't arrive in time anyway. Chris's death polarized America, especially Alaska. Many locals viewed him with contempt, labeling him an arrogant, romantic fool who underestimated the wild. To this day, many Alaskans dismiss him as an idiot. Undeniably, Chris acted with reckless naivety. He ignored repeated warnings, carried no proper map, and had inadequate provisions. If he hadn't stumbled upon that bus, he would have died weeks earlier. Yet, calling him a mere fool is unfair. Surviving alone for 113 days in the brutal Alaskan bush and taking down a massive moose with a .22 rifle requires immense grit. The word that truly defines Chris is immoderation. He was a man of extremes. Even the authors who inspired him didn't live by their own words as drastically as Chris did. Jack London praised the primitive life but lived a comfortable, wealthy existence and died struggling with alcoholism. Tolstoy preached asceticism and sexual restraint in the Kreutzer Sonata, yet frequently cheated on his wife in reality. Thoreau lived in the woods at Walden Pond, but his cabin was within walking distance of town, and he frequently went into society to socialize. These authors left themselves safety nets. Chris did not. Once he committed to an ideal, he went all the way to the edge. Chris's story continues to fascinate people. For decades, the Magic Bus remained on the Stampede Trail, turning into a pilgrimage site for fans. Tragically, the obsession claimed more lives. 2 hikers drowned in the Teklanika River trying to reach the bus, and 2 others died trying to mimic Chris's lifestyle. The influx of stranded, underprepared tourists forcing costly rescue missions became so severe that in 2020, the Alaskan government airlifted the bus out of the wilderness. It now sits safely inside a museum. There is a profound irony here. Chris fled civilization to die in a vehicle built by civilization, and the bus that preserved his memory was eventually brought back into the ultimate symbol of society, a museum. Into the Wild is not an inspiring adventure story. It is a tragedy and a cautionary tale. Chris McCandless wasn't a perfect hero, but he wasn't a bad person either. Everyone who crossed paths with him spoke of his immense kindness, honesty, and work ethic. He wasn't looking for fame, and despite his wealthy background, he preferred earning his keep through hard, manual labor. He was engaged in a raw, authentic search for meaning. As he wrote in a letter, "You are wrong if you think joy emanates only or principally from human relationships. God has placed it all around us." His fatal mistake was completely turning his back on humanity. But on his deathbed, reading Dr. Zhivago, he wrote one final, monumental realization in the margins: happiness only real when shared. In those final hours, perhaps Chris finally forgave his family and understood the necessity of human connection. The most heartbreaking note remains day 107. Beautiful blueberries. Even on the brink of an agonizing death, he still possessed the grace to appreciate the simple sweetness of a wild berry. Chris knew the risks of his choices, and he paid for them with his life. But when we look at his final photo, even through the starvation and pain, his smile appears deeply sincere. We can only hope that before the darkness claimed him, Chris McCandless finally found the absolute peace he had spent his entire life looking for.